Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and it's wonderful to see all of you. Before I go into conversation or presentation on women and Africa, we have put together a short video showing some of the women we work with and some of the women who are familiar to you from Africa. And I'd like us to run through that before I start the presentation. Okay. So once again, let me say thank you all for coming. It's so nice to see so many of you in this room and some familiar faces from visits in Africa, from other visits in Washington, D.C. So it's a real pleasure to see so many of you here. I'd just like to start by beginning to thank you very much for this warm reception. And to begin, I want to extend my sincere thanks to the International Conservation Caucus Foundation and to all of those who are involved in organizing this lovely event. I'd like to thank Marie Royce for the very gracious introduction. It is always refreshing and reassuring for me to journey to the United States and to have the opportunity to meet face-to-face with many people who are interested and passionate about conservation in Africa. ICCF continuously offers me and myself and AWF the space for this type of interaction, so I thank you. I also wish to thank Dana Beard, Sissy Boyd, Cynthia Rogers, and Betty Ann Turner for your interest in Africa. It was a pleasure to meet you and your spouses during your last trip. I have not read the book of distinguished American women that you gave me, but I promise you. My daughter saw it shortly after you gave it to me, and one of them decided she wanted to read it first. And several other of her friends have joined the queue. They say it's a great book. I'm especially pleased to join you here today under the auspices of recognizing women's leadership in the realm of conservation, and more broadly, the role of women in forging a bright and positive future for Africa. I must tell you that as a woman, I do not often find myself in a majority when it comes to conducting the business of conservation in Africa. It is not at all common for me to be the only woman at the table, or maybe one of two. And so professionally as a woman, and personally as a mother of two daughters, I am extremely keen to see opportunities expand for women and see the elimination of the all too many barriers that presently stand in the way of women assuming leadership roles in Africa and beyond. The question is, how do we do this? How do we overcome not one, but all the too many cases of gender discrimination in Africa and in the world? The continuum of constraints can be daunting. In many places in Africa, women still cannot inherit land or determine who they will marry, things that many of us here take for granted. Hundreds of thousands of little girls do not have the same access to schooling as little boys in the same homes, villages, and in towns. We also don't have access or equal access to science labs, law books, and boardrooms still favor men over women. These challenges are not new, and they're certainly not small. To me, there are three vital things that will serve to improve these dynamics. The first is to acknowledge and celebrate women everywhere who are presently blazing trails, but especially in Africa, where they're serving as role models and showing how we women can and should help ourselves raise the issues that are important to us. The second is to enlist the support and the cooperation of our male peers, and it's nice to see a couple of you here, so that they too can take action, and they can take active action and effective roles in ensuring that women's voices are accessible and valued in any setting. The third is to ensure that governments create frameworks in which women can realize their potential. Fortunately, there is an increasing number of women role models who are lighting the way and breaking through the once impenetrable barriers. A few of the most notable, and some you've seen on that video: Helen Johnson-Sirleaf, the current president of Liberia and the first female president of an African nation. President Johnson-Sirleaf brings strong credentials to her post, but also tremendous personal strength. To get to where she is today, she endured house arrest, imprisonment, and charges of treason for having had the audacity to even run for office when she stood against the strong-armed dictator Charles Taylor. In Mozambique, Luisa Diogo, who served as Prime Minister since 2004. While her rise to the high post is another first and therefore notable in and of itself, what's even more impressive to me is that one of her first acts in office was to push for HIV and AIDS to become a central issue in Mozambique. She did this particularly because of the devastating effects of AIDS on the country's women and the most vulnerable. Graca Machel is another amazing role model, and many of you know her. She's been a freedom fighter, an ongoing advocate of women's rights, both in Africa and globally, a strong voice and influence through the new African Partnership for Development peer review mechanism. This mechanism is responsible for reviewing the performance of governments across Africa on governance, financial management, and human rights. And I might add, she was one of the prominent personalities that came to Kenya when we went through a short period of turmoil. She was among the women, among the individuals who helped to broker peace in the country. For me and for those of us who are in the field of conservation, we're extremely fortunate to have Wangari Maathai as our role model. As you likely know, Wangari is Africa's first female Nobel laureate, but a much lesser known fact is that she was also the first woman in Eastern and Central Africa to earn a doctorate degree, which happened to be in veterinary medicine. Wangari rose to prominence by promoting the idea of planting trees for fuel, fodder, and to restore forest cover, not only among her neighbors, but among their neighbors too. And I must say I'm one of those neighbors, because she was my member of parliament. Her first clients in what grew into a nationwide and international movement were other women. Along the way, she was able to put the loss of forest cover and water in the context of poor governance, and to highlight the grave impacts that unchecked environmental degradation would have in people's lives in very, very concrete ways. She successfully challenged a dictatorship in Kenya that was rapidly destroying Kenya's natural resource base. Here in the United States, women on both sides of the aisle will inspire a generation of women in Africa who will say, yes, we too can. On a much broader scale, there are successful women cooperatives popping in every corner of the African continent, focusing on farm produce, beads, clothing, and natural products like shea butter and honey. By pooling these skills and resources, these women are literally changing their economic destinies and those of their children, especially their female children. My second point is on the role that men can play in supporting the development and leadership among women. For example, there are 45 Rwandan women who together account for 56% of the Rwandan parliament, making this the first and only country in the world where women outnumber men in the national legislative body. Did you know that Rwanda's constitution mandates a 30% quota for female members of parliament? Rwanda's constitution was ratified in 2003, and you can be sure there was not a majority of women in our parliament. It is the leadership's farsightedness, and some may say courage, of male legislators who ensured the inclusion of that clause in the constitution. Because the playing field has been so uneven and for so long, and because most cultures on the continent remain highly patriarchal, we must have men's commitment and action. We must enlist our male counterparts to act on behalf of their sisters, their mothers, their wives, their classmates and friends, to eliminate unfair laws and practices. And we must have men join us in debunking the stereotypes of leadership, of leaders as men alone. And perhaps most importantly, we must get beyond the point where neither men nor women are transferring prejudice to their boy and girl children by attitude, word, or deed. Third, as a major world power, donor, and trade partner, U.S. international assistance and trade policy have a huge impact on women in poor countries, both directly and through the messages you send. Our policies are becoming more pro-women. Much remains to be done by all governments across all continents to bring about real and sustained change on the ground. The theme today is Women Saving Africa, a big theme. As you know, Africa is a vast continent, and women face many impediments and a great deal of discrimination. Yet we know our abilities and our potentials, as seen through the examples of accomplished leaders in Africa, as seen through the examples of accomplished leaders in Africa here in the US, and of anonymous and largely unsung local efforts that often do more to inspire grassroots women and to give them hope. After all, and you may not know, It is the women of Zimbabwe who have kept families and communities together through the last 5 years of the country's immense suffering. It is the women of Rwanda who have slowly woven back the fabric of family and community after the genocide, and have led by example in working towards reconciliation. The question for you and me now is, how can this type of effort and commitment, so natural for women, be harnessed to help the continent save its environmental resources, improve human rights and governance, and improve access and opportunity for all citizens? We at AWF are playing our role in multiple ways. Through our internal policies, we focus on recruiting women in the field that is male-dominated. And you saw Fiesta, who is one of our stars at African Wildlife Foundation. We provide opportunities for women in our leadership program. 2 years ago, we awarded our Shamrock Scholarship for Master's and Ph.D. study to women only, and have an outstanding group of researchers currently in the field. We are also currently holding 3 diploma scholarships in reserve for women wildlife managers in Southern Sudan. And many of you know that this is a country that's emerged from long-term war. It has wonderful wildlife, but has a very shortage of managers at all levels. But we felt that despite the lack of those managers, that we would like to give an opportunity to women as the country develops and gets on its feet again. In our field program, we're making special and specific efforts to support women's programs that empower them, and we are slowly creating wealth and giving voice to women in some of the remotest parts of the continent. Finally, for any type of change or progress to occur anywhere, there must be someone or a group of people that lead the charge. There is no reason why that person cannot be my daughter or yours, or one of our sons for that matter. Like any good leader, President Johnson said it, Wangari Maathai, and the Rwandan parliamentarians are truly changing people's lives and impacting history. But unlike their male counterparts, they have the added contribution of changing the way women and men perceive opportunity and potential for their own daughters.